might be dismantling your legacy stone by stone, and the terrifying truth is that you don't even hear the sound of the collapse. There are behaviors, small, repetitive, and almost invisible, that act like corrosive saltaire on a marble monument. They don't destroy your reputation in one loud explosion. Instead, they erode the respect others have for you in a slow, silent decay. You might be repeating these patterns today at this very moment, completely unaware that the foundation of your professional and personal life is cracking under the weight of your own choices. In today's video, we are going to expose the 4 toxic habits that are quietly sabotaging the image you've worked years to build. If you want to walk through the world with gravity, to be a person of substance who is naturally respected, trusted, and remembered, you must identify and incinerate these habits. Before we dive into the core of today's reflection, I want to pause for a moment of genuine gratitude. The Stoicism everyday community doesn't just watch videos. You embody a movement. Every reflection you share in the comments, and every time you choose virtue over impulse, you give us the fuel to go deeper into these ancient truths. Watching this digital porch grow into a sanctuary of self-evolution is what drives our mission. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for walking this path of daily evolution with us. Respect is never lost by accident. It is forfeited through a series of small, unexamined concessions. To see these patterns clearly, we must look through the lens of the great porch. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, once wrote that we should waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be, and simply be one. This applies to our reputation as well. Stop worrying about what people say and start mastering what you do. Seneca reminded us that the highest sign of wisdom is a person who observes themselves with brutal honesty. Today, we strip away the masks and the excuses. I have made these mistakes myself. I have been the victim of my own lack of awareness. It was only by applying Stoic principles that I began to see a shift, more clarity, more weight to my presence, and more balance in my life. So if you are ready to look into the mirror, grab your coffee. Get comfortable. What we're about to discuss might be uncomfortable, but it is the only path to true liberation. The first habit that acts as a silent poison to your relationships is gossiping. We often mistake gossip for a harmless currency, a social lubricant, or a way to pass the time during a dull afternoon. But the reality is far darker. Every time you engage in the dissection of someone else's life, you aren't just sharing information. You're advertising your own lack of character. As the Stoics understood, your tongue is the gatekeeper of your integrity. When you gossip, you send a loud, clear signal to everyone listening. I cannot be trusted with a secret, and I feed on the failures of others to feel significant. I remember a specific moment during my university years that changed my perspective on this forever. There was a student named Sarah, quiet, diligent, and intensely private. In our social circle at the time, gossip was the primary form of entertainment. One afternoon, a rumor began to circulate that Sarah had a deep, unrequited crush on a fellow classmate. Within 48 hours, this private vulnerability had been turned into a public joke. I watched as Sarah withdrew her silence, growing heavier, until she eventually moved to the periphery of our group, her trust completely shattered. That was my wake-up call. Gossip isn't just talk. It is a weapon that leaves invisible scars on the victim and a stain on the speaker. When you participate, you aren't just a spectator. You are an accomplice in the destruction of another's peace. Epictetus warned us that if we hear something, we should not repeat it. If it does not concern the common good, it does not belong in our mouths. When you speak ill of the absent, everyone listening makes a mental note. If they talk about Sarah this way, what do they say about me when I leave the room? Being worthy of respect starts with the discipline of selective silence. Choose to be the person who elevates the conversation. Move away from the small minds that discuss people and the average minds that discuss events toward the great minds that discuss ideas. In the Stoic view, your words should serve as a bridge to virtue, not a trap for the reputation of others. The second habit that erodes the respect of others, perhaps faster and more permanently than any other, is the lack of reliability. We are currently living in an era of character debt, where it has become culturally acceptable to promise the world and deliver nothing. We promise to show up, we promise to help, we promise to change our ways, but when the moment of action arrives, we offer only the empty currency of excuses and silence. Here is a hard Stoic truth. When your word loses its value, you lose your value right along with it. You become a ghost in your own life, a person whose presence is never truly counted upon, because your commitment has no weight. I spent a significant portion of my life believing that being flexible or spontaneous was a virtue, when in reality it was just a mask for my own lack of discipline. I would make plans with the best intentions only to cancel them at the last minute when a better or more comfortable option appeared. I thought it was harmless until one specific incident revealed the true cost of my unreliability. A close friend, Emily, had spent months meticulously planning her birthday celebration. She had invested her time, her heart, and her resources into this gathering. I gave her my word that I would be there. I was emphatic about it. But when the day came, I allowed myself to be pulled away by a trivial activity that felt more urgent in the moment. By the time I sent a rushed, half-hearted text to justify my absence, the damage was done. Her reply was polite, but it carried the cold weight of a door closing. In that moment, I realized I hadn't just missed a party. I declared that her effort and her time were worth less than my passing whim. I had declared my word to be worthless. The Stoics viewed the honor of one's word as a fundamental pillar of justice. Seneca wrote that nothing is more valuable than the commitment of a person of integrity. In the Stoic tradition, your word is not just a social convention, it is a sacred contract with yourself. Reliability is not built with grand sweeping promises. It is constructed in the quiet, mundane repetition of integrity. It is arriving when you said you would. It is meeting a deadline without being chased. It is having the courage to say no at the beginning rather than sorry at the end. People do not expect you to be a superhero. They expect you to be consistent. If you cannot be trusted in the small details, you will never be invited to the table for the great ones. Respect is the natural harvest of a life lived with integrity. Sometimes the theft of respect isn't a grand robbery. It is a series of petty thefts. One of the most common ways we drain our own social capital is through the habit of interrupting. It often masquerades as enthusiasm, speed, or high intelligence, but in reality, it is a manifestation of the tyranny of the immediate. When you cut someone off, you aren't just contributing to a conversation. You are broadcasting an unconscious and arrogant message. What is happening inside my head is far more significant than what is coming out of yours. Over time, this small act of impatience builds a wall between you and the people you lead or love. Earlier in my career, I was a victim of my own ego. I was the anxious professional always leaning forward, waiting for the slightest gap in speech to insert my own insights. I thought I was showing engagement, but I was actually demonstrating a profound lack of self-control. During one particularly high-stakes meeting, my mentor pulled me aside and delivered a quiet strike to my pride. She told me that I was so focused on being heard that I had become deaf to what was actually being said. This is what the Stoics would call a failure of prosouche, or mindful attention. We become so wrapped up in our internal monologue that we treat other people as mere obstacles to our own expression. The philosopher Epictetus, who understood the power of restraint better than most, famously noted that nature gave us 2 ears and only 1 mouth, so that we might listen twice as much as we speak. This isn't just a quaint proverb, it is a tactical advantage. When you practice Stoic listening, you allow the other person to fully empty their thoughts. You create a space of presence that is increasingly rare in our frantic world. Silence is not a void. It is a form of power. By refusing to interrupt, you demonstrate that you are the master of your impulses, and there is nothing more respected than a person who can govern themselves while others are governed by their anxiety. When you learn to listen with your full presence, you don't just understand better. You gain the consideration of everyone in the room. We have all found ourselves wandering the labyrinth of the victim, venting about the traffic, the weather, or the perceived slights of a manager. We often treat complaining as a pressure valve, a necessary release for the stresses of modern life. But when complaining becomes your primary dialect, it stops being a relief and becomes a heavy shroud that you force everyone around you to wear. Constant negativity doesn't just describe your environment. It begins to define it. People start to distance themselves, not because they lack empathy, but because being near a constant source of lamentation is spiritually exhausting. You become a drain on the collective energy of the very people you value most. I remember a period in my life where I felt as though the world was a conspiracy against my peace. If the sky was gray, I felt personally insulted. If a project failed, I looked for someone to blame. It was a friend's blunt honesty that finally broke the spell. He told me, "It feels like nothing is ever good enough for you, and honestly, it's getting hard to be around." It stung, but it was the truth I needed to hear. I had adopted the identity of the victim, and in doing so, I had abdicated my power. I was waiting for the world to change, so that I could finally be happy, which is the ultimate form of self-imprisonment. Stoicism teaches us that complaining is a futile rebellion against the nature of the universe. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself and us that everything that happens is either endurable or not. If it's endurable, then endure it and stop complaining. When you complain about things outside your dichotomy of control, you're essentially arguing with the rain for being wet. It is a total waste of vital energy. The mind works like a radar. If you train it to find barriers, it will find them in every sunset. But if you train it to seek solutions or practice radical acceptance, you reclaim your agency. Respect is born from the vibration of resilience, not the noise of dissatisfaction. Every time you feel the urge to lament, ask yourself, is this within my control? If yes, act with courage. If no, accept with grace. This is how you transform from a passive victim into the architect of your own character. If you have stayed with me until this moment, take it as a sign of your own potential. You have shown the rare willingness to do the heavy lifting of the soul, to look inward without the comfort of a mask. Gaining the respect of the world is a secondary effect. The true victory is gaining respect for yourself. Today, we have identified the 4 shadows that dim your light. The betrayal of gossip, the bankruptcy of unreliability, the ego of interruption, and the paralysis of complaining. These are not permanent flaws. They are simply old garments that no longer fit the person you are becoming. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. In a world that thrives on noise, distraction, and superficiality, the most radical act of rebellion is to be a person of substance. By replacing these 4 habits with Stoic discipline, active presence, and integrity, you set yourself apart from the majority. You become a sanctuary of stability in a chaotic world. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 4 habits has been your greatest silent adversary? Write the phrase "I choose to be worthy of respect" in the comments below and share which habit you are reclaiming your power from today. This act of public commitment solidifies your intention and strengthens this community of practitioners. If this reflection added value to your journey, like the video and share it with someone who is currently battling their own shadows. Subscribe to join us on this path where philosophy is never just a theory, but a blueprint for a life well lived. Remember, you are the sole architect of the energy you bring into this world. Build what is beautiful and leave the rest behind.